Hello, everyone. Good morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you're listening. Welcome to this week's session of Market Movers. I am Pedro, the senior blockchain analyst here at DappRadar. And yeah, today we have a special guest, Boris Ribo, part of our research team. How are you doing, Boris?
Hello, Pedro. I'm doing good. Thank you very much. Always glad to be here.
Good. Happy to have you here back. So a lot of things to discuss. The space appears to recover after the ongoing global conflict and a two-bear month that appears to continue, but still cryptocurrencies like ETH, Bitcoin, and so on are starting to recover. And one could argue that NFTs and the narrative around the metaverse and play to earn may be behind this recovery. So before we begin, I want to remind everyone here that, as always, we'll be recording the session, so you can listen to this or any of our previous shows on DappRadar's YouTube channel. And most importantly, for today's event, we will be giving away some POPs, which are basically NFT attendance badges. And all you have to do is message Cornelia here with the DappRadar logo or brilliant Discord moderator ASAP. So, as I was saying previously, important events affecting NFTs, of course, the Yuga Labs acquisition, the metaverse events like the Boston's Fashion Weeks, and more brands announcing investments are making look NFTs bullish. The outlook is bullish, but right now it feels like the space is too packed with dozens of projects launching every day. So it is fair to ponder the question at this moment: what is driving the sales, fame, or utility? So, what do you think, Boris? How what's important right now?
Uh, I can give the analyst answer, which is both. But if pressed, I think the answer is going to crystallize itself. Before I answer that, I want to pedal back a little bit and look at the history of NFTs. Where have they gone? Where they started, through the separate stages that they've gone through, and what the future would look like. And I think as we go along this journey, then we'll understand where where the industry is going and what the deciding factors are going to be. So if we remember back in 2017, when CryptoPunks first launched, like nobody knew what NFTs are, what to do with them, and if memory serves me right, you could just buy them for $50, and a lot of people literally made fortunes on them. So hats off to them.
Yeah,
As
even in 2020, you could buy them for $200, $300. So yeah,
yeah. So hats off to those who are savvy investors. And since then, once uh, when people saw the absolute potential of the amount of money that could be earned in them, because initially that's what drove the uh, initial influx of a lot of people, is that you see something that's easy to get, a project that's easy to develop, and it became a significant vehicle both for creators and for purchasers alike. For creators, it was because traditionally the art before that was that somebody would make an art piece, they would post it, and if somebody likes your art, they'd buy it, and that would be it. But with major projects like that, you can not only, as a creator, you can generate significant amount of money. I mean, the average minting would net you, assuming you're minting around 10K NFTs together. That's for a small team of what usually they are between 3 to 5 people. That's 3.5 million in total. So that's a lot of minting money. And
Mm.
for yeah, and usually they also have a few special NFTs saved for themselves, and it would eventually, if the project is doing well, they would have uh, the potential to sell their own NFTs at a significant sum, and then the people who are participating part in that project, especially if they got whitelisted on the mint, they they could rake in thousands of percents of potential gains. So that was the original driver. And once the people realized that, hey, this is a completely new investment vehicle that we haven't seen anything like this before. You can't even get, like at the point in time, you couldn't even get such a return on most cryptocurrencies.
No,
So
no, no.
yeah, so when
What we saw in the summer was totally insane and without a precedent. But actually, you mentioned 2017 as the date where CryptoPunks were launched, and then it was around May, and then on November they came the CryptoKitties, which are also one of the OG NFTs.
yeah,
And we it's also important to, let's say, put in perspective that the success of NFTs was basically 4 years later. Like they were created. Actually, the first NFTs were minted into 2014, right? So then 3 years later, they created CryptoPunks, CryptoKitties, and these projects start to gain, let's say, more traction. They were like more real projects with a real message and idea behind a philosophy. Um, so it's also interesting to see how the space reacted 4 years later. It was not until 2021 when NFTs really started to make themselves visible within the industry. So it also shows the evolution of not only the market but also investors, right? But because first it's the emotion of a new technology discovering cryptocurrencies, and then in 2020 we saw DeFi, and then in 2021 we saw NFTs. So it is how the evolution of the market, but also of the investors, that I think has gotten us to the point that we are currently right now.
right, exactly. And this is the point where things get interesting, because with the initial, when we started seeing that projects were, you know, rentable and they were highly successful, uh, when then people started creating more complex projects, because and initially they were just JPEGs pictures, then you had meme JPEGs pictures, then you had 3D avatars, then you had collaborations with different arts and celebrities, then you had animated avatars. Um, the roadmaps for the projects became ever more ambitious. It wasn't whether the original ones, the original CryptoPunks, you just had the pictures, then you had you needed to create some kind of metaverse integration. Someone's needed to have physical and digital merchandise. Some people wanted to create a game. And then to a certain point, is what we're going in right now, and we're seeing a lot of projects, is that we're having a sort of a bloat of roadmaps, and that it is generally expected for every project to have a certain level of, pardon for using gaming terms, but post content support. So it's a post
Yeah,
launch
yeah.
content support, in the sense that in the first few months you're going to have your first DLC, your first offering, then you have to prop up with something else, and you have to constantly be on edge and provide the original holders for something new to incentivize them to hold on to their NFTs, or if they're not interested in that particular offering, to sell it off to somebody once the NFTs accrues enough hype and interest behind them. And when you mentioned investors, what we also saw is a complete revamping of how investing is done as well. Because initially, you could literally buy any NFT, and it was like the .com era. You could literally buy anything and it would go to the moon. And that's what a lot of it attracted a lot of, for the lack of uh, proper nomenclature, it attracted a lot of normies, a lot of people from the mainstream,
Yeah.
and people got the hype, and it was like the new gold rush. People wanted to buy an NFT, people wanted to make crazy money on them, and unfortunately, like all things, like good times come to an end, and we saw that not all projects are hyped up what they ended up being. Some people unfortunately got maliciously rug pulled in the hype. Some people weren't rug pulled, but the projects didn't deliver on what they were promising, and it got a lot of people disappointed when they realized, oh no, this is like, NFTs are bad, this whole space is bad, it's all bad. But it's not like, is it the space that's bad, or is it just the level of investors that's bad, and they came in there under false expectations, and or perhaps unrealistic expectations that this is going to go on forever. Because if we look at parallels in the investing world, we have similar things happening where people have FOMO. They invest in Tesla. They invest in the next hottest thing that's constantly growing at unprecedented rate. And then when good times to come to an end and the stock comes to a correction, like we're experiencing right now, and since 2020 we pumped so much money. Like if I remember correctly, 60% of all dollars printed throughout history of the US got printed in 2020 alone.
Yeah.
So we had an unprecedented liquidity injection into the market, and of course, it did. The Nasdaq nearly tripled, and the Dow and all the NSP index had unprecedented growth that we've seen ever before. And naturally, it has to come down sooner or later. In our case, it came a little bit later than expected, but it was the hammer was going to fall down one day. And a lot of people, and unfortunately, those who did not see this, got caught holding the bag from purchasing the stocks at whenever they were at their highest. It is an unfortunate fact of life when it comes to investing. NFTs are not any different. So it's not the market that's bad, or at least no, it's not the NFTs that's bad. It's just the reality of the market. So, but getting back to the topic of what is more important NFTs in NFTs, whether it's utility or it's fame, because as we spoke earlier on, is that the market is becoming very saturated.
But just important
Yeah,
to remind here, like there are a lot of NFTs out there and with different use cases. Right now, we're talking about only collectibles, right?
yeah,
Because the market for NFT games, the market for virtual worlds, it's a complete different rationale, and the behavior for the investors are completely different. So, no, just important to remind the audience that what we are talking about is collectibles like avatar pictures, like the Bored Apes, CryptoPunks, Doodles, and so on.
yeah. Good point. I'm going to circle back to that later on after I've done pontificating. Uh, but this is essentially the idea. Yes, is because the market is getting very saturated, and we're entering a phase of I would call it an arms race, where you constantly have to be bigger, better, bolder, and you have to differentiate yourself from the other projects, because we already have blue chips that are there that I can't say too big to fail, but they definitely have a sizable presence on the market, and they're unlikely to go away anywhere. It's your CryptoPunks, it's your Doodles, it's your BC and whatnot. So
Yeah,
there's
there's definitely a segmentation on the market right now where there are like very established projects, like the ones, well, Yuga Labs, the now Bored Ape family ecosystem, and the CryptoPunks ones. And yeah, there are 4 or 5 also projects on that tier. And then we also have a second level, a second tier with other projects. So it's also shows how the market has evolved, and now it's so vast that it's you can even have tiers, right? So yeah.
So when it comes to utilities, we're also seeing a bloat, because you need to not only promise, because it's easier to promise, but you also have to deliver. And the question is, will we be able to deliver on what we promised in the roadmap? And because a lot of projects launched, and correct me if I'm wrong, in the mid of last year to end of last year, we're going to see in this coming year a lot of those roadmaps coming to fruition. We're going to see a lot of projects starting to deliver on what they set out to be, whether it be transitioning to a DAO, whether it be hosting those crazy parties, whether it be collaborating with industry, with the fashion industry, or other experts. So this is going to be for lack of a better word, the moment of reckoning, where the wheat is going to be separated from the chaff, where if the people behind the project really have the chops and the volition to do what they started to do, or whether it was a flash in the pan. And we're going to see the market consolidate itself into uh, basically the projects that stood the test of time, and projects that will unfortunately fade away.
Yeah, in
So
the end, this is a very unpopular opinion, and this is my own opinion, so don't take it for granted. I think in the end, we're going to see 90% of the NFT project fade out, like in 3 5 years. Like most of this project will not fulfill the roadmaps and or will become too small compared to the other projects that are really receiving investments and receiving support from their communities in a bigger sense. So I think that's going to happen. But I mean, it's about selecting and cherry picking these projects that actually have a good utility, actually have a good team behind that can accomplish their goals over deliver instead of under delivering. So
yeah. So to answer the initial question, what is more important? And I would like to say fame. The reason is you can have
fame,
the great.
you say fame.
Yes, fame, and I
Okay.
will rationalize it as thus because um, in the utility section, you can promise people the world and even perhaps that you have full intentions of delivering it. But if nobody is going to discover your project, then you are really at that point left to the good fortune of lady luck. And if somebody, I don't know, a big flipper or somebody discovers your project and realize, hey, this is a very competent team, they're doing great stuff, and then maybe if you're lucky, then people would appreciate, and then everybody will flock to you. Then, of course, we see a lot of projects that generate a lot of hype and they become a flash in the pan. But I would argue without the initial pilot light, the initial hype to start the project, that you are essentially dead in the water. It's a very
And
precarious position to take, but I think without the starting flash to take the projects to the spotlight, you're not going to get anywhere without that.
I mean, I agree partially because at this stage there are tens or dozens of projects launching every day. So at some point, either you spend money on marketing or either you collaborate with some famous celebrity to shield your project and yeah, basically push it on their social media. Having a good social reach, of course, increases the chances of your project getting successful. That's for sure. On the other hand, lately we have been seeing a lot of influencers, NFT influencers, and even celebrities like sport athletes, or I don't mean like the famous Hollywood people, but like mid-tier Hollywood artists shilling out projects that eventually collapse in 2 months after launch. So that's also what I think, that even though your project might be famous, I mean, related famously to the celebrity, I do not necessarily see it as a factor of success. The team is different. If you have a famous team behind, like Doodles, for example, which their team is basically Dapper Labs, these Canadian guys who launched CryptoKitties and launched also the NBA Top Shot Marketplace. Okay, you see they're famous because of their accomplishments in the Web3 space. That's a different kind of fame. So I do partially agree with your take, and on my opinion, I think utility will always be the king for NFTs. And why? Because NFTs utilities, we are used to see airdrops or passive incomes, but if you think about utility of NFTs, you need to think about games, the metaverse, how much utility you're going to receive from your NFTs in the real life as physical assets. So that is why what I think that from my perspective, utility might be a bit more important than fame. Although I reckon that, yeah, indeed, fame for projects might be nowadays a bit, well, yeah, important factor, especially if they are tied on capital constraint that they can afford to launch a marketing campaign. Of course, having a celebrity on board can help you big time. So, but yeah, man, I definitely think utility here leads.
And to circle back to the initial point, which I promised early on, is when you said that not to forget that we're talking about collectible NFTs, that there are other uses for NFTs. And this is what I want to stress, is that utility for NFTs is going to change, and change in the sense that we're not only going to see collections, because that, as we said, that market is going to consolidate, but it's not all doom and gloom. We're just going to enter a new paradigm where NFTs are going to be used for something different.
Oh,
And
definitely.
they're still going to retain their value. It's just that although this market particularly is going to consolidate itself, and people will understand what the rules by which it's played, the Wild West era is going to end, then people are going to create the next best thing and start seeing which rules can we start bending, which rules can we start ignoring, and where can we go with NFTs. Can we start using it for, as you say, for popes and prove our attendance at a particular event? Can we start using them for I know, as tickets to a concert? Can we start using them as proof of identity? There's many different ways of how this can play out. And this is the idea, is that NFTs in itself, or the market and the demand for NFTs, is not going to go anywhere, but we
Yeah.
are going to enter in a new paradigm.
Okay, yeah. I think that's where we are heading, and definitely, it's a very interesting conversation. I mean, right now, as we speak, there's the Boson's Fashion Week happening on the Boson Metaverse. So a lot of famous fashion brands are there displaying their wearables digitally, which is absolutely insane and unthinkable like 4 years ago. So we are going to see a new paradigm, as we are aware that we can tokenize basically anything and convert it into an NFT. This type of assets will become ubiquitous in our daily lives. So I do see this paradigm trend that you're seeing and talking about. And you have just published and worked on a couple of reports about new collections that are launching in the market. So why don't we try to put them on perspective and try to analyze these collections, like the DappRadar cells, the cyber brokers, which is one of the ones that I find actually interesting, and Anonymous, I think. So what can we learn from these collections? Is it fame or is it utility, actually?
And this is where I would strongly go with my initial thesis that it's fame, because if you look the collections that and fame, as you rightfully, I wanted to make that point, but you beat me to the punch. Which is, fame comes not only in how much, and pardon the language, but not how much shilling that you do on social media, but how much your reputation that you have behind you. Like, for example, the Dow Darcells, Craig Redman, he's got quite an illustrious career behind him. He created the character of Darcel in 2008, doing his blog, and after coming to prominence and entering into the cultural zeitgeist, he started having a lot of demand for, not just for the character himself, but just for his simple and expressive art. It's almost like Andy Warhol era pop art. And he made, not only multiple covers for National Geographic, the Süddeutsche Zeitung, he did a cover for the New Yorker. He also collaborated with the Mercedes-Benz. He collaborated with Google and even Pokemon to make different Satskis and covers for iPhones. And pretty much, if you go on his website, then there's nothing that he hasn't touched with his art style. He pretty much designed and worked with everywhere, from the traditional art scene where he had multiple exhibitions in Paris and New York, to commercial aspect where he, as a designed covers for magazines, to uh, collaborating with IKEA and many others. So definitely the fame aspect did work for him. And then because he's famous as well, he managed to attract very capable hands to help him with NFT project. And I think that has definitely, he leveraged his fame in the correct way. And I'm interested to see where that project is going to go. Because personally, I got fascinated with him as a person in researching this project in of itself. Same way, I would say, for the cyber brokers, a very interesting project. As funnily enough, the head artist for the project, he worked with a company that made Raid Shadow Legends, which is probably, if you've been watching YouTube videos at any point in the last 2 years, you've seen the advertisements as one of the more successful mobile games. And
Josie,
hmm? No, not
Josie,
Josie.
right?
No, Josie, she's the head of the project, and I apologize if I mispronounced the name of the artist. Um, his name is Azamat Kairov. And again, I apologize if it's mispronounced, but yeah, he previously worked for Plarium Games, and they're mostly they develop mobile games, but they're very known for Raid Shadow Legends. And but this is what I mean. But we've got a
Okay.
celebrity team there. Josie herself, she's a very successful. She comes from a finance background, and she made NFT art in the truest sense without any utility. So she just created expressive pieces of art with some poignancy towards them, and they're very successful in the sense that financially, the floor currently on OpenSea is 8 ETH with an average price around 10. And she's published around 350 pieces, which I would say is a very successful artist. And she's also heavily involved in the crypto scene. She's has physical and digital exhibitions of her art. And, I expect somebody of this caliber to produce something really interesting and, if not only entertaining, but visually compelling. And as such, the
Yeah.
art for this project, I think, was very aptly chosen because the first thing that caught my eyeball it's obviously the art. The art is very interesting and expressive. As far
Yeah.
as for the rest of the team, we also have an all-star team. We had Christopher Chapman, who worked for created MMO experiences for Walt Disney, worked for Decentraland and Sandbox. We had Ben Hindorn, who has a gaming company of his own. So there are people who already have an experience, like a certain veterancy behind them, and they have experience in creating online communities and engaging with online communities. So this is what I said: when you have fame, if you build it, they will come. Like, I am pretty sure that these people have the knowledge and the know-how to build something interesting, and the community is going to flock behind it.
Fair enough. I mean, our Dark Souls artist, like, certainly can put his own unique style, which make these NFTs unique by that simple fact. And it's similar like Coolman's collection, like another artist that launch a successful project just by name, because these projects don't really have a roadmap. They're basically more cultural or pure art collectibles, I would say. Of course, they can work as avatars, but if you compare our Dark Souls and Cyber Brokers, it's not that I'm saying one is better than the other. You just look holistically at both collections and analyze what are the advantages that one has over the other. And artistically, it's very subjective. So, of course, you cannot analyze from that perspective. But if you take Cyber Brokers, for instance, Cyber Brokers, from the technical standpoint, it's an on-chain collection, right? An
Yeah,
on-chain collection means that all the metadata contained from the art itself is stored on a blockchain, in this case, Ethereum. So it's fully on-chain. The metadata cannot change. And this is something that we see, I could not even say like it for 3% of the collections. I mean, there is Avastars, there is Blitmap, there is Nouns, there is Chain Runners, and I can count it with my fingers, I'm pretty sure, that collections that are anonymized, that are really fully on chain. And for me, this is something that adds value. It doesn't bring utility at per se, but adds value. But what adds utility from my point of view, and it's very important, is how these cyber brokers might end up being your identity in the metaverse. In 2 years' time, if I go inside Somnium with a 3D voxel cyber broker, that's a pretty good utility for me. Why? Because besides myself loving the art, I really like what they transmit as into this same metaverse narrative. So I think from my point of view, it's you see the utility uh, comparing both projects. Besides the art, of course, like because that's very subjective and it will vary from person to person. But comparing them holistically and under the same under different perspectives, I think you can see the difference in utility between both projects. However, at this point in time, as the NFT market is very crowded, yeah, of course, the our Dark Souls factor that being created by a famous artist definitely is something to ponder, because this collection was in the top 10 collections of OpenSea like for 2 weeks. So that's and that goes straight to your point that fame is certainly needed at some point, especially at this time when the NFT market is fully crowded.
Absolutely, and I hope I'm at least somewhat vindicated in my thesis.
Yeah. No. I mean, of course, no. At some point, fame is required. It's not necessary, but it definitely helps a lot. And I put the example of the doodles. I think doodles is the perfect example when you combine um, a fame with expertise, and that makes you strong, because you also have the projects like Stoner Cats. Stoner Cats, a collection of NFTs launched by Ashton Kutcher, Mila Kunis, Chris Rock, and a handful of celebrities, including Vitalik Buterin. It has not performing quite well, but that's the risks of the space. So I would say before investing in a collection, you need to you need to analyze it very holistically and define what are your preference. If it's fame, okay, maybe you prefer be part of a club where my co-founder is famous artist, or I prefer an avatar that it's going to be very flashy on the metaverse. But that depends.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
As
Cool.
always like to remind that always do your own due diligence, always research what you're investing and committing your money, and never commit anything that you're not ready to part with.
Exactly. That's the last part is very important. Very important. Cool. So there goes the time where when we ask our audience, is there any question or comment that you want to ask us? Feel free to shoot. Don't be shy. And in the meantime, what about the anonymous project that you also reviewed and it's launching today?
Uh, I can't spoil all the things because it's will go live after this.
Oh,
But
okay.
yeah, but it goes in the. This is why I wanted to bring it up. Is that it goes in on the other side of the spectrum, because I think it has a very robust um, offering when it comes to utility. They will have digital goods, they will have physical goods, they're going to have collaborations with fashion industry representatives. And in the idea is that they want to turn the project into a brand where, with their own shops in major cities where you can walk in, and if you have the NFT, then you'll be able to redeem exclusive merch, exclusive products, whether they be small things or whether it will be sound, music, visuals,
Yeah.
clothes, what have you. So the utility is all there. But the question is that the project, despite everything, and when I looked at the team, they all look very confident, and in that they will be able to pull everything off, and they certainly also look competent as well. The question is that they don't seem to have that fame behind it, where people are all immediately flocking towards them. And
Yeah.
that would be my point, as I said, would be my counterpoint to the original, is that without the initial burst of everyone following and getting interested in the project and engaging it, without the initial burst in that confidence in the long term, perhaps even if you build an amazing pipeline and you keep, you keep to every milestone that you promise to deliver, and you're very diligent with your work, if the community if the people are gone by the time you even hit your first milestone, then all your work has been for nothing. It's very important to keep that initial wave or first to develop a big enough wave for people to stay and then diligently apply and fulfill every milestone that you promise to deliver.
Yeah, and this brings us to another important factor of NFTs, the community. But I think when you have some famous people on board, the community might come along. So good point. Good point. And you saw it with Invisible Friends. Like, of course, Marcus Magnusson is an amazing artist. But Invisible Friends, one of the most hyped collections all time. Like before launching, it was over 500,000 Twitter followers. Um, and, and basically, the community drove everything. And it was hyped. And the price is still going on. So even though it's hyped collection, the community, I think, has kept afloat this project. So, and I think it's the opposite what is happening with this anonymous project. So, okay, cool. Okay, so if there is any other question, I would like to thank every one of you for being active in our community and valued members of DappRadar. Please don't forget to claim your Pope. Message our brilliant Discord manager, Cornelia, which has the DappRadar logo here on the audience. And that could be all for today. Thank you, Boris. Thanks for showing up here again. Nice
Likewise.
discussion.
Thank you very much for having me. I very much like to have a very free-form discussion this week, and hopefully you'll have many more like it in the near future.
Sure. It was actually quite interesting and yeah, very engaging and cool. Don't forget to subscribe to our social media channels on Twitter, YouTube, and Discord. And that would be all. Thank you, and have a good night and a good weekend.
Wonderful. You too. All the best.
Bye.